Movie night. Andy and Gabe. Andy and Gabe watch movies.
Are you gonna do that
Third
every
one.
time?
That's the question. That's the question. Is he gonna do it every time?
God. Hi.
Hello
Welcome
and welcome.
to. No, quiet. I'm doing it. Hello and welcome to Movie Night with Gandhi and Abe.
We're talking about a film that we saw. Gabriel got me to watch a Hallmark movie today.
I did literally get you to watch a Hallmark movie. That's one of the All right. You know what? That's a really good lead-in. This movie that we watched was Not Without My Daughter, starring Sally Field. It is the story of a woman who was held hostage in Iran with her daughter in the 80s during the post-Iranian Revolution, during a time when the Iran-Iraq War was going on. It was a very difficult time in that country, and it was a very difficult time for them. And mother and daughter had to escape the country. And that being said, you're quite right that the entire production was very hokey and very silly and very low budget, let's say. And
okay, you say low budget. I looked into this. This movie had 13 times the budget of Taxi Driver.
Really?
Yeah.
Well, you didn't see it on the screen. That must have been everybody's ticket to Israel where they filmed it. That's astonishing to me. Oh yeah, $13 million, was it? It didn't do very well either.
No, I mean, I'm not surprised.
It wasn't very good, but that wasn't exactly the point of my showing the movie. The point of my showing the movie to you was kind of the same reason that I showed you. What was that one?
I'm looking at the fucking poster right now, and it looks like I did it on MS Paint. I just
yeah, right. It was the same. This is for the same reason that I showed you The Best of Times and that I showed you Unlawful Entry. In fact, all of those movies and this one that I mentioned were all kind of watched at the same time when I was growing up. This is a classic rental of my childhood, my late childhood, early to late childhood. And I'm glad to get into some of my personal experience with the movie before we get into the actual meat of the film itself, because Dan and I, and my parents to a degree, thought this movie was kind of funny.
I don't get why this would be a regular rental. You could have fucking rented The Goonies 2 Electric Boogaloo. You could have You could have rented. You could have rented fucking Space Jam or some bollocks.
Yeah. Well, no, I wouldn't have ever. I would much rather watch this than Space Jam. You know, I've never once seen Space Jam. Not once in my whole life have I seen that movie, and I think I'd rather watch this than Space Jam. But
coming up next week, Space Jam.
Oh, fuck! That's when I quit the show. But I think that's a really good question. Why did we watch this so much? I think my mom liked it, and I think that was it.
Do you find that like housewives of our parents' kind of generation, like that boomers into Gen X generation, they've got a real thing for like miserable stories.
Yes, well, that's why Lifetime and Hallmark were so. Well, Hallmark.
My mum and my nan, they just have like books that they go out and buy and they read, and it's stories of people talking about how they were severely abused by their parents as children and shit like that, and they just read this shit, and I'm like, okay, all right.
I'm into fucking grimdark fantasy novels. Like, why would you want? I don't know. I kind of don't understand that psychology, but yes, I do find that boomer women, in particular, definitely gravitated toward that kind of stuff, and that's definitely why we watched this, because my mom liked it. I'm very sure my dad didn't hate it, but me, my brother, and my dad definitely all found this movie funny in a way that I don't think my mom. She did kind of. Maybe they all thought it was. Maybe we all thought it was funny. I don't know. But there are definitely some. There's
When this film was over,
uh,
I said out loud, "Okay, whatever," and I turned the TV off. And the thing is,
what else can you say?
and and I think I need to express how weird it is that I vocalize at all when I'm on my own. Some people talk to themselves. I don't, and I can't relate to it. Like, I am silent. I don't swear in frustration when I fucking do something wrong in private. I'm silent. But I went aloud, okay, whatever, and I turned it off.
That's funny. So I never it's worth pointing out that this is I guess it's part of the Marvel Cinematic Universe now, because we get to see Dr. Octopus beating the shit out of Sally Field.
So yeah, like Doc Ock married Aunt May, much like in the comic books. However,
Right.
it's the wrong Doc Ock and Aunt May. It's the Amazing Spider-Man
Yeah.
Aunt May, and then the
Yes.
Raimi
So
Doc
it's that
Ock.
whatever, when all the three Spider-Mans are in that movie together, it's like that warped like alternate universe thing where and then he beats the fuck out of her.
So
I want to make it really clear. Domestic violence is not funny, but that was so over the top and ridiculous. And what I mean is the scenes where not all of them were, but the one in particular when they're in the school and he throws her down and starts just MMA style forearming her. It's just ridiculous. And it was very clearly, it's a very 90s film. It's a very late 80s, early 90s film where you would take events and compress them by sort of indicating to the audience how they felt. Like, so it had to be really over the top, and it was very funny. Go ahead.
So we saw Not Without My Daughter, and Gabriel's explained the premise, and I've got to say, if you want to make a movie about domestic violence, your domestic violence needs to have some fucking weight to it. I thought this movie was fucking terrible. I am so... I always try to be really polite. I try to be really polite. Not Without My Daughter has got very good acting and nothing else. There is no artistry to the direction, the cinematography, it's all flat. The music starts off with a John Carpenter's The Thing style, like you're like, oh shit, this is going to be pretty tense, and then it disappears.
Yeah.
It's a Hallmark movie that somehow snuck into the cinemas. So much, in fact, that because of the controversy surrounding this movie that we'll probably get into in a bit, I looked up stuff about this movie and stuff about the book and stuff about the history of Iran/Persia around this time. And I found someone talking about the book saying, hey, the made-for-TV movie they did about this was really good.
Well, actually, I disagree with that. The made-for-TV movie they did about it wasn't very good.
So, I got to address the big
ahead.
elephant in the room.
Sure.
None of them are Iranian. Alfred Molina is a fucking English actor who has got like an olive complexion because his parents are from Italy and Spain. Like, it is for all the world, like, because Americans can't pronounce anything correctly. So it's almost like someone, yeah, you gotta get an Iranian. What? You mean I've gotta get an Adalian? No, an Iranian. That's what was going through my head the whole time. Housekeeping. I hate the way Americans say Muslim. I have only ever heard Americans call them Muslims. They call
Muslim.
Muslims. I have only ever heard Americans say Muslim. Every Muslim I've ever met from all these different countries have said Muslim.
Mm-hmm.
Only America calls Iran Iran.
Yeah.
Flock of seagulls.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And it drives me crazy. So
we call it. Yeah,
Yeah.
we call it Iraq too. Well, we
Yeah.
call it Iran and Iraq.
Yeah. Iraq, Iran, Muslim,
Mm-hmm.
Islam. Like so for me, hearing Muslim, Iran again and again and again it just hits that part of my brain that you know when you were saying about Harley Quinn in the last episode where she's hanging from her wrists, and you said like in real life that tends to asphyxiate you. That this is my psychosis.
Yeah,
that has always annoyed me.
It annoys me too. It annoys me too because it's ignorance that's sort of that's sort of solidified into a national understanding. It's so indicative of how little we understand of the cultures that we have in the past and possibly currently manipulated and try to make moral statements about.
So if we rein this in, basically, so Sally Field marries an English man by way of Italian and Spanish descent who at the least claims to be from Iran.
You're right.
He is a loving husband, and then he wants to go to Iran to see his family. So they go
during the post-revolution period, during the war, and during the Iran-Iraq war.
And Sally Field is like, well, why can't they come to us? I don't feel comfortable going to Iran right now. So he convinces her, and he says like, I love you, and there's nothing in my life I love more. I swear on the Quran, nothing bad will happen to you. And he seems really believable. And like he means it, and then they get to Iran, and then he starts like slapping her about and like, you're my property.
Yes.
And it seems to happen almost like when he'd go out and pray every morning, as they do. Muslims will pray 5 times a day, and every morning he'd go out and pray, and all of a sudden he's starting to get leery with her, and they portray him praying each morning like he's being fucking possessed. It's
true. It's true. Well, part of that too,
domestic abuse is stored in the Islam kind of thing. And here's my problem. Here is my problem. Mm-hmm. Sorry, but just while I'm on a roll here.
Go ahead. Sure.
My problem is, and I'm talking about the film. I don't give a fuck what happened in real life right now. I don't care about that. I'm talking about the person in the film.
Mm.
He wouldn't turn on a dime like that.
Mm-hmm.
He goes from normal to a wanker overnight, and I don't believe it. Yep. They give reasons like, well, he experiences racism in America. I'm sure he does. Italian Americans often do.
True.
No, like, I'm sure he does.
Yeah.
They say that he loses his job because of it. Press X to doubt. That felt to me like a lie. Yeah. Weirdly,
I don't believe it. Yeah,
I don't know what it's meant to be in the case of the film.
Yeah.
But then all of a sudden, he's a nutter, and I'm sorry. There would have been red flags. There would have been if he could go that mask off, that he's just open hand slapping mask his wife, just MMA ground and pounding her in the fucking street. If he had that in him, don't you dare tell me he wouldn't have been like this in America behind closed doors.
Yeah, well, here's the thing. And I know I understand you're limiting your comments to the movie, and the movie does an absolutely abysmal job of that. You're quite correct. He's just like loving father, everything's good. He's under the America spell that makes everybody nice and nice white fathers or whatever, and then he goes to Iran, and
There are
he's under
no
the
cats in
Iranian spell,
America.
and then there are no cats in America. That's correct. And yeah, he does flip on a dime. That was very inaccurate. And the thing that really got me about that and bothered me was she did a really good job in her book, as I recall, describing his gradual that process where he turned into a different person. And by different person, she didn't mean wife beater; she meant fanatic. That because Saeed Mahmoudi in real life, I believe, was radicalized, as a lot of Iranians were, for good reason. There were important things happening in their country, and there was a lot of anti-Iranian sentiment back then because of the hostages.
By the way, Gabriel is not a radicalist sympathizer. When he says for good reason, he means like understandable reasons.
Understandably,
don't come at us.
So well, when I say radicalized, I don't mean he didn't become a terrorist. Radicalized doesn't mean criminal. He became radicalized in that he returned to a very fundamentalist view, not only of his religion, but of his country and his country's history. And he started, in her recollection, he started, as she put it, practicing his religion again, meaning a fundamentalist version of his religion. He started making sure that all their food was kosher. He started changing their lives.
Yeah, that's a thing that bothers me, because in the book she says like kosher or something like that, and it's like, well, halal. How much attention?
I said kosher because she said kosher. Yeah. Kosher is Jewish. That's not.
Yeah,
Islam.
exactly. Like, how much attention are you paying?
Yeah, and see,
halal?
Even I did it because of it. Yeah, exactly. Halal. Quite correct. Thank you. For
I don't know if
there's
because obviously I've grown up around Muslims in part because of the aforementioned family in the segment that I might have cut. But the aforementioned family that I have that are Muslims, but also just being a Londoner, being an East Londoner, you're around Muslims all the time. Yeah. So, like, I don't know if that's plays in part of it, but the thing is like for her, and I'm talking about the real person here, and she says kosher on like TV interviews and shit like that. It's like, but you were married to him. Come on, like you would know these sort of things.
Yeah, and that's the thing. Well, the thing is I'm gonna
not that
you
should have abducted her.
No, of course, but I think that's because this is one of the things that I really believe about her account of what happened, especially before they went to Iran. I do believe that he very abruptly returned to the practices of his upbringing because she didn't seem to understand what those were, and that didn't seem to be present when they first got together and got married and whatnot. And the thing that really struck me about that, and I'm gonna really open up here, a couple of years ago, I had a really severe sort of mental crisis. I had what they call an existential crisis, and those things are really not fun. And I started getting back more into the Catholicism of my youth as a result of this sort of panic response to a lot of stuff that I was going through mentally. And I started doing the same stuff. I started making sure that certain things were certain ways that other people hadn't agreed to, and I became like that for a very mercifully short period of time. So I can absolutely personally understand what was going through his mind when that happened, especially considering the political situation back then. This was pre 9/11 Islamic revolutions, and so these were.
This is not praise of the movie, by the way. He's talking about the actual guy.
No, not of the movie. I'm just talking about the guy. Yeah, I think we're kind of done talking about the movie. It's bad. It's made badly. I really appreciate you pointing out the fact that it was shot badly. It was just everything about it was so cheap and so manipulative that it turned right around and became one of the most classic unintentional comedies of my life. Dan and I, when we saw this movie in the early 90s when we lived in New Mexico, we used to walk to school through a golf course. We had to, boomers talk about how they had to walk a mile to school. We actually did have to walk just about a mile to our school. And during that mile, we would quote this movie and make fun of this movie. And it was one of the catharsis of our childhood, making fun of this movie. It was classically funny. But I want to get back to the real Saeed Mahmoodi. That was a very abrupt but very gradual process, that he was reacting to what was going on in Iran. He felt that he should have been there. He felt that what was happening in his country was really good and really important, and he was experiencing racism from the people around him, because this was also a time where in the United States the sociopolitical attitudes toward Iran were very, very bad. So those things combined, that part of her book, which I believe is a really good look into how radicalization happens. And I'm dumbstruck that they cut it out of the movie and they decided to just have him turn to the dark side like Anakin Skywalker.
He caught the Muslim.
Yeah,
he caught the Muslim. That's what did it.
Because it wasn't about Islam. He wasn't radicalized by Islam. He was radicalized by the government of Iran being something that he could believe in again. It wasn't just the religion. In fact, he only started practicing his religion again, if you notice, not you, the people in general, if you notice, he only started practicing his religion again when the political situation in his country changed. So that was all fucking backwards, and it was so knee-jerk, and it was so, I believe that Betty understood what was going on, because she was very clear in her book that this was coinciding with him feeling bad that he wasn't there during this important time in his country. And but she worked on the script and she worked on the movie, and that could have been cut. Is just baffling to me.
I mean, the first time you see him at work in the hospital, they have these, like stock racists who are not saying anything that... I'll be honest, listen, I'm an East Londoner. I've been around a lot of fucking racists.
Sure.
They don't say things like, why would you even stitch up a Muslim because they believe they'll go to paradise anyway? Because every fucking religion believes that. That's all religion.
That's what a religion is. That's why you have a religion.
They all believe that. And I thought that it's like they were trying to show that the people that he worked with were racist, but it was stuff like those aren't even letters on that newspaper. There's just squiggles because they can't understand. Like Farsi or Arabic.
Because, and I'm telling you, dude, this is what I mean when I say this was such a late 80s, early 90s movie, because they know they want to convey racism, but they convey it as a mosaic. They convey it as this, they're like, okay, we're going to condense all the racism he experienced into this one guy who says this one thing that stands in for the racism.
The guy who says that one thing, he sounds like he's never been racist in his life. He sounds like it's his first day on the job of being a racist. Like, you're writing squiggles.
Yeah.
You believe that you're gonna go to heaven? Oh,
absolutely, absolutely.
The worst display of racism I've seen from a pragmatic standpoint. Like, oh my god, if you want to hurt someone, you can go for more than that. Like, that's what bothers me. This film's got no punch. Like,
no.
He doesn't get called slurs. He doesn't have any like meaningful attacks on his culture. It's just like, haha, I can't read Farsi. Like, he doesn't like.
That's right. Yeah, exactly.
He doesn't
I'll give one exception to the not having punch. I think the tense scenes work, and they're not helped by the absolutely hokey soundtrack, but I think the tension works in various parts of the film. That I do, but the Yeah, the everything else about it is such a cartoon and such a badly, it's an offensive depiction of racism. Like, how the fuck do you do that?
Listen. It's not that hard to wind me up. I don't think you could ever hurt me by saying my writing looks like squiggles. because you would just go, yeah, all writing is squiggles. That's like
That's right. That's right.
you it has no bite, it has no impact.
Yeah.
The racism has no impact. I don't think the domestic violence has any impact, and I think if you're doing a film about domestic violence, a serious subject, then you need to have a bit of fucking courage.
I absolutely agree with that. Let me say, the one scene when she comes back the first time, when she comes home and he aggressively walks toward her and starts hitting her in the head and saying, "Where were you? Where were you?" That's the one scene of domestic violence that I think works, and I'll just be open again and say the reason I say that is I've been her, that's happened to me, and that's how abrupt it is, that's how innocuous it looks. Everything about that one scene was accurate, but everything else, when he's MMA, when he's giving her the people's elbow in the
but because when he comes in and he just stalks her down and he just slaps her and then he gives her another one, like that when she first comes home and he really like he lays into her a bit, that bit worked because what he did was he was slapping her to give her a bit of a fright to not disobey him. That worked because that is like that is more subtle domestic violence. Like, wouldn't even necessarily mark you, but it marks your soul. You know,
it does, and it lets you know that you can't trust this person. It lets you know that you're afraid of this person.
That's why that scene works, because they're such good actors. But when you get to the point where he is supposed to be actually beating her, if you're gonna do that, you need to fucking do that.
Yes,
you
and
can't.
Otherwise, it's going to look ridiculous.
Shot from far away, and like there's no marks, no blood. It feels like it wants to make you empathetic. Oh, but we don't want to feel too uncomfortable now. You know, this is a Hallmark movie that we've snuck into a cinema. Like, it doesn't want to just go for it, and I find it cowardly, because when you're showing evil, you should show fucking evil.
Yes. No, we really didn't. They really didn't want to do that back in the early 90s. They really didn't want to do that. But considering how much of a Hallmark movie this really was, I don't get that. I don't get that choice. You had watched you had watched the subsequent documentary that her husband made telling his side of the story. If I get, did you watch the whole thing?
I tried, but it was more boring than
it was
this. And then I started skipping through it, waiting for them to say anything. I was expecting that moment where he goes, "She said that I beat her on this day. However, the CCTV says otherwise."
Right. Yeah.
I was waiting for that. I was waiting. I was waiting for the. In fact, I wasn't even in Iran at that point in time. I was waiting for the scandal. I was waiting for the scandal. Like, I like the title Without My Daughter. I like how it plays on the title of the book and of the film, and goes, well, she wouldn't go without her daughter, and now I don't have my daughter. I like the idea of that, but like it wasn't saying anything. It wasn't doing anything.
Well, because what's he gonna say? It doesn't. Well, let me say the reason that I want to talk about that documentary a little bit in another section, but the reason I brought it up was in that documentary he plays that part where he's beating her.
They're laughing.
And they start laughing hysterically. And I tell you, by my hand to God, Andrew, that's what I did when I saw that when I was a little kid. That was the reaction, because it's fucking stupid and it's ridiculous, and he probably never did that. The scene that we were talking about that works, that's what domestic violence is. The scene where he's dragging her around the hallway and giving her the Hulk Hogan leg drop and off the top rope and shit. That's not what it looks like. That's not what it is. And nobody does it that publicly. I would imagine, even in those kinds of countries where people don't do it that publicly, you keep that. It's the fact that it's swept under the rug and not talked about and stuff that makes it as insidious as it is. And when you do that, of course, they all burst out laughing because it's fucking ridiculous.
Yeah, it doesn't work. It doesn't work, and it trivializes. Yeah, it trivializes it. It really does. And the thing is I fully appreciate that there's going to be someone who might watch this and go, well, these two men talking about this, yes, because the way you portray this stuff matters. The way you portray this stuff matters. Like, when I say that the violence should have been violence, I'm not saying that because I like seeing people get beat up and hurt by their spouses. I'm saying that because if you want a film that is supposed to make you think and is supposed to make you feel uncomfortable about something that actually happened, you have to make the audience feel uncomfortable. You have to create empathy. And you can create empathy through violence. Or failing that, don't show the violence. If you're not comfortable with showing the violence, don't show the violence. Show the aftermath. Show her coming out with because you know what did work? When her friend, the other white woman that was in Iran, what worked when her husband stopped her on the street and went, "You need to be a good wife to your husband," and they show his wife who's got a fucked up lip from where he's beat her. That was more effective than the 5-star classic that Alfred Molina and Sally Field were putting on outside the school. Like,
absolutely,
that was more effective. Either show it or show the aftermath. And if you're going to show it, make it real, make it honest, make it believable. And that's what winds me up with it.
In her book, Betty Mahmoudi, and I'm not going to say Mahmoudi like you do because I don't have the patience for that. I'm going to pronounce it incorrectly.
Very American of you.
Yes, absolutely. I'll be the American representative for this very American film. In her book, Betty Mahmoudi described the Iranians who helped her and her daughter escape the country through a long process of negotiations and trying to find smugglers and friends and people who would finance her and people who would get her out of the country. And she described these people as generous, kind, selfless people who were helping her out of pure compassion and didn't ask for money. They told her, in the movie, again, just like the violence and everything, this is condensed into one person who was helping her. It was actually multiple people who were telling her, when you get back to the States, if you can, pay me back. But it was pure charity on their parts to help her. She did not describe kind, generous Iranian men who helped her get out of the country who were kind and generous because they liked America. That is not what she described in her book, and that is what the movie portrays, and that is fucking disgraceful. That is fucking disgraceful propaganda.
I'm
That
glad
does
that you
not
have.
match reality.
I'm glad that you have brought this up. The Iranians that help her, including the main Iranian that helps her, who is played by an Indian. He's one of the main characters in Temple of Doom, actually.
Oh, that's right. I didn't go say. I never actually. I've seen parts of that, but yeah, you're right. He is.
So
Wow.
he is portrayed as being very Western, very like fancy, intellectual. He's got a smart suit. He's very well spoken. The people that help her are always portrayed in that way. The tailor, who likes America very much.
Yeah.
Listen. They don't give a fuck about you, America. No one in the history of planet Earth, other than an American, would ever help an American because they like America.
True.
This goes for every country on the planet. What bothers me is they are presented in this very Western, almost kind of European kind of way. And then the people who are against her are depicted as like kind of boorish, savage individuals.
Yeah.
When she is being smuggled across the border, you're more typical movie version of an Iranian person. You know, someone more ragged, tatty clothes, more outdoorsy. What's the first thing one of them tries to do? Tries to assault her in her sleep.
In a completely unrealistic way where it doesn't. And even that, when he does that, he comes over and he starts like snuggling with her like she's a pillow or something. That is not how that's initiated. That is not the vibe of that. Yeah.
The way people are portrayed in this movie is they are either westernized or they're assholes.
Yep.
And that's a big problem.
And that's why the movie is propaganda. I don't think the book was propaganda, and I don't think Betty meant to produce propaganda, although she worked on the script. But there's a lot of different cooks in that kitchen. But I don't think this is what bothered me about the movie versus the book. The book was such a balanced, realistic view of these things, because in the book she didn't portray them that way. She said these people lived a different lifestyle than the rural family that she was staying with, but she was very clear that even though they lived differently and they weren't fundamentalists and they weren't fanatics, which is important information, she nevertheless said, but keep in mind, this is a different culture. This is still a different culture. And as you very rightly point out, the people that were helping her were not portrayed as having a different culture. They were portrayed as having our culture, meaning Western culture, and more specifically, American culture and American loving people, which is just... It's so disgusting.
Seeing as we've brought up Indiana Jones here. We've brought up Indiana Jones here.
Yeah.
Not an Iranian character, but an Egyptian character. Salah in Raiders of the Lost Ark and Last Crusade and Dial of Destiny, which is now out.
Mm-hmm.
Same problem in that you've got a guy who's not even like Middle Eastern or North African playing that character, but how is he portrayed? He is portrayed as being of a different culture. He's very loud. He's got different customs. He's got an absolutely massive unit of a family, but he's portrayed like a person.
Right.
I'm not saying that there's a deep portrayal and understanding of Egyptian culture in Raiders of the Lost Ark. It's not really that sort of movie, but he is not portrayed as a stereotype. He's not portrayed as being good or bad. He's a person with cultural differences.
Yeah. Well, let me maybe this is a good way to close out, because you had said, and we were talking about this a little bit earlier, you had said that there were parts of Betty's account of this that you didn't quite believe, and I kind of share your I've definitely shared your feelings about the movie portrayal. One of them was the escape. You said that you had thought that she didn't quite escape the way that she described. Do you think she didn't go through the mountains? Was that?
No. Right. So basically, off air, you asked me how much I believed it, or whether or not I thought that the story was bullshit. And I think that there was probably a lot of embellishment.
Mm-hmm.
In fact, I would be shocked if there wasn't. I would be gobsmacked if at least 30% of the book hadn't been made up or embellished. Because they would have taken the book to a publisher who would have gone, wow, this is a great story, but I think we need a little more to get... You know what I mean.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely, yes. And she did have a co-author who I don't think he's credited on the cover. I can't remember. It's been so long. But she did have a co-author who I was very likely working for the publishing company to make it,
of course,
novel-ish. Yeah, absolutely.
So the documentary that features her husband featured another woman, an American woman that knew them. And take this with a grain of salt, because no one watching this video, no one involved in making this video, no one involved in making the fucking movie is all that familiar with Iran's geography and weather patterns.
Yeah, for sure. That's true.
But the woman in that documentary, which made the argument essentially that this film and this book did a lot of bad for the perception of Iran in America, which I could believe. She said that the story of her escaping didn't really match up with Iran's geography and weather as she knew it, considering the time of year it was meant to have happened. I don't know exactly what she's getting at there, and I don't think that Betty Mahmoudi's lying. I don't think that at all. But what I'm saying is you've got a film that purports to be based on true events. It says on the Microsoft Paint poster, based on a true story. But it's, it's based on... It's based on a one-sided account, based on the memories of a woman who is talking about some traumatic shit that happened over the course of a couple years. Not only that, through the filter of her memory, through the filter of what will have definitely been an editor and a second writer, if that's the case, as you've pointed out. I could understand how this movie, putting aside the obvious politics of the movie, which is America good and Iran scary, I could see how this film could be very misleading about what events actually transpired. And I'm not saying, by the way, I am not saying that she is a liar. I'm not saying that at all. But what I am saying is that it's very hard to separate fact from fiction with these stories, and because it's ultimately a personal story as well. Like, we can't go and dig up the history records on this, we can't. Like, Oppenheimer came out, you can go and look up the Supreme Court hearings that happened in Oppenheimer and find out what was said and what wasn't said. You can't do that here.
No, like you say, there was no CCTV footage of any of this.
And the reason I'm bringing this up, it's not to be a doubter. It's that I Googled this film and I found a lot of people saying, be wary of foreign men. Watch the film Not Without My Daughter.
Yeah.
And I can't think of anything I would recommend less than
Yeah.
watching Not Without My Daughter.
Absolutely. If you're gonna try to make yourself scared of let's face it, non-white people, yeah, of course, it is propagandistic in that way. To talk a little bit, so you brought up Saeed Mahmoudi's documentary, the father, telling his side of the story. Here's what I think. I think that everybody sees events from their own perspective. Nobody sees themselves as the villain. People always see themselves as the hero. Betty and Saeed both did. I think he genuinely believes that he wasn't abusive. I think he genuinely believes that he wanted to give them a good life in Iran. I think he convinced himself that they were okay with it, because when you're desperately trying to get people to go along with somebody, you do convince yourself that they're okay with it, and everything will be okay once we get there, and they'll get used to it, and if all the ends justify the means. I think he believed he was acting in good faith. And I think he was strongly compelled to change his family life to one that was in accord with his rekindled beliefs. And I say that because I've gone through a period where I felt very much like he did, and that's a very, very strong motivation.
As a matter of fact, you were telling me about this. You said you flew out to Iran and you married a woman in Iran and brought her back here, and you wouldn't let her leave and go back home.
That's right. I said, listen, bitch, you're in my country now. You do what I say. That's what I said.
What a load of shit.
Yeah, but I would just want to say, I think so. I think he genuinely felt betrayed. I don't. Did he tell them that he would hire somebody to kill her? Maybe. I don't know about that. But I think she probably felt that way. See, everybody feels. If I looked back on my life during periods where I was encountering family abuse, would I accurately describe how often that happened or the magnitude of it? Probably not. Probably not. So, but here's the thing. Here's the thing that bugs me. That those events, the way they were portrayed in the film, which is, as you say, America good, not America bad. Iran scary because not America. That is so antithetical to what Betty was trying to say and to what she continues to say to this day. She advocated for people learning about other cultures because we were all going to encounter each other. In fact, she was very forward thinking about this. This was back in the 80s and 90s, and we encountered, dude, you're one of my best friends in this world. You live in London. We've never been in this. Well, we've been in the same country together. We've never been anywhere near each other. You live in a completely different country. This wouldn't have been possible back in 1992 or in 1989 or anything. So yeah, she was very forward thinking about that. She recommended that people learn about other cultures, really learn about them, and not just get their information from shit movies like the one that she wrote the script for. And the point that she was getting across, she had conversations with Mahtab, her daughter. She described in an interview, and she went, I don't think she went into this in the book, but I was surprised at how good a parent she was, because she described that after their escape, she told Mahtab, their daughter, that it was okay to miss her dad, and it was okay to remember good things about him. And she reminded her that he was a great father when he was in the States before his change, and that he was a great husband to this day. She says that he was a great husband and a great
yes,
father.
she does. I saw that
was
interview
before that. Yeah, and that to me, because whatever exaggerations were in the book and movie, and I absolutely agree, there were probably many of them. I believe he did kidnap them. I believe he did coerce them to go to that country under false pretenses and hold them hostage there. I do believe that, and
yes,
I do
so
believe
do I.
that he became abusive, and that's for somebody to have that kind of insight after the fact to the person who abducted you and your child and held them hostage
says a lot
in a
about
different
him.
country. It says a lot about her, about how intelligent and strong a woman she really is, and how empathetic she is. I would never forgive that person for the rest of my life, and I don't know that I would say to my child that he was a good father and that it's okay to miss him and it's okay to continue to love him. I don't know that I would. I don't know that I wouldn't, but I strongly suspect that I would have. I would not be so generous as she was, and I
it's
really
very good
admire
interview.
that. It was a very good interview, and that's who she. That's what she was trying to say in the book. My point is, her point in the book was that this was a tragedy. It was a tragedy for her. It was a tragedy for Mahtab, and it was a tragedy for Saeed too. She wasn't happy about the fact that she wasn't like fuck him. She wasn't happy about the fact that he lost his daughter. She wasn't happy about the fact that he had changed like that, and that they had all got broken up, and it destroyed their family. And she said that in the interview, and she said it in the book. She lost her best friend, she lost her husband, her daughter lost her father. It was a tragedy. It wasn't this cool thing where, oh, we figured out you're one of the Islams and now we escaped you back to good old America. It wasn't like that at all. It was bad for everybody, including him, and she was very careful to say that. And that this movie could have been so ham-fisted about those events and completely missed that is just unforgivable to me.
And it did not have to be this way. It really didn't. I mean, that's a great interview. She's sitting there, they're talking. Both these women look exactly like Blanche Devereaux. It's
You said that's true.
it's a whole thing. She's very forgiving, and she gives him a lot of credit.
Yeah.
And I think, no, like you say, it's a damn shame that the film isn't interested in portraying this.
Yeah.
Let's see if I've got any quick fire notes.
I'll just say it's a bad movie.
It is a bad movie.
Bad movie, and it's a bad movie, and a testament to the fact that it's a bad movie is that it was one of the funniest movies that I had seen up to that point in my life.
Okay, so my quick fire notes. There's a new thing now where anything that I have left to say, I just splurge it all out at the end. Let's see, what have I got? Not a lot. One of my notes says, mention that Ben Affleck's movie Argo is set around this time in Iran. The only other note I've got is that because I quite like the Middle East and the Mediterranean as a setting, so I googled good movies set in the Middle East, and the first thing that came up was Lawrence of Arabia, and I just well, when you put it like that, I probably could watch Lawrence of Arabia. It's the first thing that came up. That's all my quick fire notes.
I'm tempted. I want to say something about Assassin's Creed as a joke, but I can't think of how I can work it into the.
They're going back to the Middle East with the new one, and
Yeah. I'm looking forward to it, actually.
So, closing thoughts on Not Without My Daughter. I'll go first.
I'm sorry. I was going to do my thing.
Go on.
So my closing thoughts are, Saeed Mahmoudi gets in a pile driver. I can't believe the ref is letting this go.
My God, that girl has a family.
Go for it.
If you're going to make a movie, and that movie features a woman being manipulated into going to another country where she is held hostage and beaten and abused and has to sneak across the border, maybe the film shouldn't be a boring slog. You know what? We're not done here. I've not put right. I haven't actually got to this point yet. This movie left such little impression on me as a film that I forgot to bring up the fact that this thing is 2 hours long, and the last 20 minutes of the film didn't need to be there. They want you to believe that at any moment she could get caught and taken back. Okay, could we have some tension in the scene then, please? If you want me to think, oh no, she could get sent back at any moment, can we have, like, people, like, just on... There's one scene where she has to be really quiet in the back, and there's a guy poking a gun into the car, and you're like, oh shit, is he going to be onto him? And then that's it. And then it's just, and then they're in a field, and then they're on a mountain, and then they're in a desert, and then they're in Turkey. The end.
There's one scene where they're driving through the desert. They get stopped by some troops, and the troops let them through because of the smugglers or whatever. But you can't understand. The language isn't subtitled, so you don't know what anybody's saying. Which I guess is the effect, because she didn't understand it either.
Yeah.
But there's one scene where they're driving, and this is supposed to be the amalgam of when they were shot at. And when she said shot at, she meant in the middle of a war zone. But in the movie, they're driving, there's nobody around, it's just their van, and you hear this gun sound, and that's it.
Smuggling her out could have been a whole film.
Yeah.
And I think it would have been a better film.
Mm-hmm.
I think this film would have been better if most of the plot is actually about her escape, and you get vignettes of her life before, through like flashbacks, things like that.
Yeah.
And then you could put more time into the death-defying escape that she made.
Yeah.
Instead, it's not in the film. I don't know. I was surprised at how boring it was, and I don't usually use boring as a complaint, but I was bored. The film does with like 3 scenes what it could do with 1. It's just long and tedious, and it's 2 hours, and they don't do very much. And if you're gonna do a film about domestic abuse, take it seriously. Don't do this Hallmark movie nonsense. I don't know. I didn't like it, and I think
just thought it was silly, and you didn't buy it at all.
Yeah, and I've noticed you tend to. I have never gone, man, this film sucks. Let's talk about it on. I've yet to do that. You've done this to me a few times.
Yeah. No, I'm glad. You know what? I have never been more gleeful.
I used to rent this film back in the 60s. It's a load of shit. Check this out.
Yeah, that's it. Really is. I'm so happy to have shared this with you, and I have never been more gleeful over your reaction to a movie that I've suggested to you, because in every possible way, everything that you've said, there are things that you got out of this that I wasn't expecting, that surprised me, that mirror exactly how I felt. And I just want to say thank you for getting it. Thank you for getting
being
why this.
A friend.
Yes. Thank you for understanding why this movie is ridiculous.
Been down the road and back again.
Correct. Oh, the mom! Saeed's mom in the movie. That actor. Holy shit. I would have believed that some random woman wandered onto the set and was really like that and didn't know she was in a movie, and that extra, or she wasn't extra, she had speaking lines. That actor, I'm trying to figure out who she is. I cannot figure out what the actor's name is, but she was fucking good. Like, she really felt like she belonged there. And that she was naturally.
I have met old Middle Eastern girls like that.
Yeah.
My aunt's mum was like that.
Yeah, she seems like a real person. That was the one. I mean, the performances were good, like as you say, except it was just the way that they were portrayed that was, but she was really good. I want to figure out who that is.
Yeah, the
Anyway,
performance is really good. There, nothing else is.
yeah, absolutely. Especially the soundtrack. Let's cut it here. It's a bad movie. If you want to watch snippets of it. If you want something funny to sit through that's unintentional comedy, if you're into that sort of thing, I recommend seeing this as an unintentional comedy, very similar to something like Troll 2. If you don't, then just don't bother with this, because it's a bad movie.
So next week, our very first episode, Gabriel wanted us to watch Buffalo 66, which was this, to him, like an offbeat and unusual love story that he really liked. There were 2 films, and we're going to cover both of them this year, that are my equivalent of offbeat love stories that are a bit weird and a bit different, that I really like. The first one, the one that I was originally going to pick for this, our next episode, was Chungking Express. We're not doing that next week. We're going to do that, in a month or so. But then we had a conversation about the Suicide Squad, and it just sparked a little thought in me. So next week we're doing a very strange road trip love story that came out only last year. We're talking about Bones and All. I'll see you next time.
Sounds like a good porn movie. All right. See you next time.